am not scripted, and my students know that I'm an improvisational person. I like to speak about things as they're happening in a live sort of way. I did actually write a script today. I did, but I want to start by just saying a couple things off the cuff. One is that, just a note to my students, we're just going to have you come up as you want when we do the presentation. So we'll just kind of volunteer basis who goes first, and we'll do it that way, because I realize we don't all know each other, and that's going to be fine. But in starting, I want to say a couple words about how my students' work fits into the topic that I'm talking about today. And I had on the flyer listed that I was going to be speaking about medical archives, marginalized archives, violence in the archives, which that's exactly what I am going to be speaking to. But I also said I'm going to be talking about community archives. And I want you to think about this a little differently, because I'm trying to exemplify what I'm talking about. So I'm going to be very personal today. I'm sharing things from my personal archive. I want you to think about that in relation to community archives, okay? And when the students share their work, I want us all to kind of try to think about whether the student's going to comment on the archives or not. I want us all to be trying to think about the contributions that these make, whether to the archive here at the university, because every single student who is a part of this university community is contributing to an archive, whether you're writing a paper that never goes anywhere except for you and your professor are seeing it, or you end up publishing it as an article. Whatever you do, whatever you create while you're here, whether your archive is seen and cataloged or not, you're still creating an archive. So every single presentation that we're going to see today from my wonderful students is part of the university archive. Okay, it might not end up within these walls, but it's certainly part of the archive. I also want you to think about the different kinds of identity-related social justice archives that their work interacts with. Okay, so some of that work the students are going to be doing themselves, and they're going to talk about it with you. But other, I want you to also think about it too. Okay. So, oh my gosh, it's up there, and I only have to click. This is amazing. All right, this is not how it works in my classrooms, but I like it. So you'll see here I have biomedical archival violence, our lives, our bodies, and our communities of archival resistance. And I want to begin with the personal, because my interest in the archive as a political space began as a realization of the archive as a personal space. So I'm going to just let those sit up there for a minute. Okay. As an entity with the capacity to either uphold my survival or to break me. The acute urgency of the archive became known to me when I experienced what I in my research call biomedical archival violence. For me, my first recognition of the archive in my own body and life was born of pain and persecution. That recognition or realization began to form when I was sitting on a hospital bed in a psychiatric hospital. In my own archive, and the archive of now, I would describe myself as a detainee, a queer embodied person experiencing false imprisonment. Okay, so what you're looking at right now on the screen. On the left is a little plastic bag that doesn't actually have an account number on it, but it's from the Erie County Medical Center. It has my name on it, and it has jewelry that I had to take off when I was being entered into the psychiatric hospital. So I kind of, certain things I don't take off normally, like my ring and my little necklace, which usually stays hidden under my turtlenecks. But I see it as a sign there of the violence. Okay, this is part of my personal archive, this little bag. I know I have that bag somewhere buried away, but it's kept. Okay, I didn't get rid of it. And I took a picture of that for a reason. I didn't know at the time, I wasn't thinking, hello, I'm an archivist. I had no conception of myself as an archivist at that moment. But I took the picture. I took the picture because I needed to preserve the pain, the history, the violence. Okay, and so that for me encapsulates it. This other picture is a picture of my bed, and all over my bed, these are documents from my 10 days at the psychiatric hospital. What I did during those 10 days was largely to just collect any document that was given to me. I had to write, you can't see it here, but there's a little pink marker over there because there really were no pens in psychiatric hospitals. So everything here is in the faintest little pencil that I could have. And unfortunately, it's not great for archives because the pencil bleeds and it fades. And as I look back on those documents now, I had a journal and I had kept notes in the journal. Some of it I can't even make out anymore. It's already faded too much. And I've taken pictures of them and the pictures suck, right? So the whole thing is this disappearing archive. I'm trying to keep it. But I knew when I got home from the hospital, I wanted to show, I was like, I've been through something. It's big. And how do I capture how big it is? Well, I put all the documents out and I took this picture. And then in the center of it is a painting. This painting I created during occupational therapy, which was for me, occupational humiliation. I did not like having to be in a psychiatric hospital painting. I did not enjoy that experience. I felt infantilized. And that is what I painted while I was there, which would only just make me more pathologizable. It would only just make me seem more mad. Okay. So now I'm going back to that concept that I had said before of false imprisonment. I've got two images here. One is featuring Cornell Law School's Legal Information Institute's definition of false imprisonment as, quote, the act of restraint on another person which confines that person to a restricted area or a bounded area, which might include a locked door, physical restraint, failure to release, or a, quote, invalid use of legal authority by either intention, abuse of power, or malicious prosecution. So those are the legal terms for what I experienced in 2017 here in Amherst, New York, when my lesbian body was targeted, subjected to surveillance, entrapped, criminalized, denied due process, and then forcibly imprisoned in a mental hospital. Although something within me was stirring deep down inside me that recognized that I was experiencing an iteration on the state violence to which queer bodies have been subjected for centuries, I was not consciously aware of my connection to that history. It was only in the process of coming to recognize the importance of archives to my fight for survival that I was able to see and begin to trace that connection, which is what I am working on in my dissertation project today. Over here, I decided to put this up. It is a screenshot of me. I'm in the corner in bed in the morning, on the morning that I was taken to the hospital. I'm talking to my daughters. They're very young there. We were FaceTiming, which is something that we would often do. It was a Sunday morning, I believe. No, it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It might have been a Monday. And we were just having our morning conversation. And maybe about 5 minutes after we ended our conversation, I was called by a police detective and told that they had some information about something that was going on and they needed me to come in. And that was their plan to take me to the psychiatric hospital. But I want to show you, because I like to look at that photo. This is an archive of me as I really was that day. The terrible threat to society that I posed. I kind of try to contrast that. Because there's the archive of me, which is the taking of me to the mental hospital. And then there's this picture that stands as part of my personal community archive against that narrative that says, like, that's me smiling at my kids taking a screenshot because I'm not with them and I miss them and I want to save every little fragment of any time that I have with them, even if it's far away. So the moment in which I was presented with my first glimpse of biomedical archival violence was back in that hospital bed, when every movement of my body was confined in pathologizing surveillance, when a nurse walked into that stark room carrying a thin stack of papers toward me. I had refused treatment, which is the equivalent of saying I had refused to be medicated. And I had asked to schedule my mental health hearing as soon as possible, because the court had assigned me a legal representative from Mental Hygiene Legal Services, which also runs out of the same hospital. I had filed a petition for a hearing for my release. Thus, I initiated the process of learning what the doctors at the mental hospital actually were in relation to me, expert witnesses and the state's prosecution. It was only when I turned over that thin stack of papers, like the one I'm holding, after being handed them by the nurse, that I understood it. As I read the documents, a pain like nothing I can hear described was unleashed on me, where I was reading a narrative about me, and I should probably go back. That's what I meant to do. So back to that picture. Where I was reading a narrative about me that had been constructed by the institution. and in particular by 3 doctors who spent collectively maybe 15 minutes total in my presence, but who had pathologized me, remarking on their assessment of my flaws in mannerism, gesture, speech, and behavior, who had determined me to be an unreliable narrator, and comprehended in the matter of my past, present, and future, casting an extreme, alienating, and downright horrifying diagnostic label on me, using the words against me that were used by my oppressors, and who were ready to justify that I was a danger to myself and others in front of a mental health judge in order to seek a determination of treatment over objection. Now, I explain these things to you because they are the archive. They are written into the archive, the medical archive, the biomedical archive that I find to be violent. I had never before felt such horror at looking at a single document, a record in my life. I had never before seen myself distorted, misrepresented, shattered in such a way. But as I winced in pain over that document, I was internalizing a violence from which I will never be able to heal. It was at that moment, though, that I began to realize that I was doing a battle. I was in battle. I was doing battle with archival oppression. Archival oppressors who, knowing nothing about the person I am, were working on behalf of the institution to have a final word over it. And even worse, to have control over my body, for I could not leave the building if I tried. And if I tried, I would have been physically restrained and labeled an urgent, significant risk of harm to myself. Okay. Now, I want to ask you, do you relate to any of this? Have you ever heard of this kind of thing before? Is my short recounting of this glimpse into my history reminding you of something, someone, from somewhere? What places in the archive of your own memory is the archive of mine touching? While listening to me, did you have flashbacks or images come to mind from any moment in history? From something you read, heard about, or God forbid lived? Anyone? These are real questions. Yeah?
My roommate was
Okay.
hospitalized.
You don't have to say anything about your roommate's hospitalization, but you had a personal story. Any other histories? Anything that this reminds you of? Yeah.
Lived in Hawaii, and cops came and took her away because she said on the phone that she was going to kill herself. Just because of something she said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything that any of you are reminded of outside of the narrative of psychiatric hospitalization? Yeah.
I was thinking about how, I think this was just an infographic I saw on the internet. I have not done more research, but I know this is a phenomenon where mental health, like mental illness labels or like labels in the DSM were created specifically to pathologize certain types of people. And by that I mean obviously queer people, but I also mean a million other types of people with a million other like ways of existing as people in the world.
Yes.
And like how that, I remember kind of realizing how that was like basically just this little microcosm of state violence. Again, like, and it was disgusting, but again, it's just wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm taking you into a microcosm of one little person's experience. Jill.
Also, just people trying to tell you who you are without fully experiencing you. It's just like I don't know. It's like you don't know me. Right? Now you're trying to tell me this.
Yeah. Any other historical references? Anything larger? Yeah.
Yes, the treatment of disabled people as a whole within the United States, not just the psychiatric disabilities, but also the physical disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go back to this. It's been 7 years since the day I came face to face with the horror of the archive. But during those 7 years, my work in the community with Mad Women in the Attic, the feminist mental health literacy organization that I co-founded with my sister after my institutionalization, and my work as a doctoral candidate here at UB have deepened my understanding of the archive, of the expansiveness of the concept of the archive, in which we locate and study forms of violence against marginalized bodies and communities, and in which we can locate and study the forces and sources of archival agency, in which those of us subjected to epistemic and subjectivity harm have been combating the violence by naming it, by telling our stories, and by connecting our present and past lives with those subjected to similar violences historically. As you might imagine, I could talk about this topic all day long. It's the subject of my dissertation, and more than that, I live and I breathe this work. It is vital to who I am and to my purpose. But now I want to shift to one of the most important sources of inspiration for my dissertation project. And I'm sorry for those of you who are not pictured in this picture, and one that brings happiness to mind, and that is my GGS classes, my students. One might think that most graduate students figure out their dissertation research subject within graduate courses or in reading literature within their field, but I came to my subject by teaching. I came to my dissertation project by teaching in the classroom with all of you at the University of Buffalo in the Department of Global Gender and Sexuality Studies. During my third year of teaching at UB, I was asked to teach sexuality and cultures. Encouraged by my wonderful advisor, inspired by the work of the Buffalo Niagara LGBTQ History Project, and in the wake of the death of lesbian social justice crusader who you've already heard about, Dr. Madeline Davis, and having learned about the Dr. Madeline Davis LGBTQ Archive of Western New York, I decided to teach a course focused on local LGBTQ history and archives, one in which we considered our bodies and ourselves in relation to archives. This course was the course that changed all courses for me. It even changed the course of my dissertation research. As I read LGBTQ histories alongside my students, I experienced what I will call archival flashbacks. I was seeing my own oppression archived in others' archives. My own history in the archival fragments left behind by other LGBTQ warriors and survivors. I experienced my first form of solace since my institutionalization. And that was the solace of knowing that my history was part of a larger history. And that what was done to me had been done to others before. Not only did this critically enrich my scholarly work, but this advanced my teaching and my own fight for justice for myself. In a way, it was in teaching sexuality and cultures that I found a way back, a way to fight back against archival violence within my own forms of archival counter-narrativity is what I would call it. My students in this course and in all the other courses I taught after it have shown me, as I have asked them to think about archives and think about themselves in relation to them, just how important studies of archives are to our understanding of violence and to combating it, to studying injustice, to work for social justice. Okay, what's next? All right, so I have asked a former student of mine who's not able to be here from that first section of sexuality and cultures, no longer a UB student, can't be here today, but she has given me permission to share something special with you today. I had devised an assignment in which students were asked to create a narrative and conversation with the LGBTQ Archive of Western New York. Autumn Clayman felt inspired by a song that Madeline Davis had written in the 70s, one which is archived online, and she wrote her own responsory song. The song that she wrote is called Ode to My Mother Was a Lady. And I don't know how to do this part. So, good, we could just do that. If we could I just wanted us to see if we could hear a tiny bit of Madeline Davis's original song. Okay, we'll just listen to it. Oh, my mother was a lady. My mother was a whore. My mother was a scullery maid who swept the kitchen floor. I'm the daughter of all women, and I've borne all women's pains, and the blood of every woman runs inside this woman's veins. All right, that gives you a little fragment from the archive, from the LGBTQ archive of Madeline Davis's song. So Autumn had written this Ode to My Mother Was a Lady, demonstrating powerfully in both the song itself and the reflection that accompanied it, her present archive in relation to the archive of the past in Davis's song. She performed the song live for us outside of Clemens. I encourage you to visit the website to hear more of the song that we just played, but I just have an image of Madeline Davis playing the guitar and then an image of my student Autumn playing the guitar as well. And I just this is kind of how I'm wrapping up things. I want to play, I think I need to go to the, I think I can do it right here. Oh, maybe not. We're going to play a little bit. We're going to try.
You want to say a few words about
writing it in conversation with it before or after? It's up to you.
So writing it itself wasn't much of a process because I had written, I think 50-something songs just the past year. So kind of just happens very easily. I wrote this in like 30 minutes.
Oh.
But it's mostly.
Do you want to just state, because I'm recording this, the Madeline Davis song that you sort of wrote in conversation?
I actually wrote the title as Ode to My Mother's Lady.
Awesome.
It's just kind of mostly about, I try to take the concept of like keeping like the aspect of independence and the struggles is also the little like symbol thing.
Awesome.
I knew I was different by the age of 13, 'cause I thought girls were pretty, not just prettier than me. Knew I wanted more than this, to hold their hands. Mama always told me to never need a man. We learned how to be confident, and they tried to tell us we were weak. It's easy to get caught up in it, and it's easy to learn to hate me.
Thank you. And so all the students in the course at the end, not all of them, but most of them, have signed consent forms and worked with the LGBTQ archive of Western New York to donate their, to make a submission from our class. So our class donated our materials, including this song, to the archive. So we like to think about this like this speaking back to the past and present in the work that we do. So yes, I'm thankful to Autumn. I'm thankful to Madeline Davis for kicking off the next portion of our afternoon, which is going to be the future of my students. I'm tremendously proud of the work that all of you do, whether you're presenting today or just coming to support other students and learn with us. You're amazing, and I want to get started. So let's have a round of applause, and whoever